Welcome to the Just Here in the Dark podcast with me, your host, Sean. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast, and I hope you're having a wonderful, weird Wednesday. Let's get into our first story. Danielle Harkins, a 35-year-old school teacher from St. Petersburg, Florida, has strangely taken an interest into demonic rituals, and soon her newfound interest will cross over into her professional life. At dusk on the evening of June 9th, 2012, Harkins gathered a group of her students at an area near the St. Petersburg Pier and started a small fire. Considering that this was not their standard routine and no reason was given for why they had all been called out there, the students were understandably perplexed, wondering what their teacher was up to, when Harkins, who had been quietly watching the students, arrived and tending her fire, broke her silence to state that all of them had become infested with demons and that they had to be exorcised. With the police spokesman Mike Pewitz later saying, at the beginning of the ritual, there was apparently some chanting and then dancing around the fire that was taking place. The next stage in Harkins' demented plan was for the kids to inflict self-mutilation in order to further drive the demons out of their bodies. Harkins went about doing it herself. According to reports, she doused one of the teens' hand with perfume and lit it on fire, causing second-degree burns, and this was just the beginning. Another student was slashed across the back with a broken bottle and another cut on the neck, after which the teacher used a heated key to cauterize the wounds. She convinced several other students to cut themselves and instructed them to all similarly cauterize the wounds to keep the demons from returning. Amazingly, none of the 7 teens who were injured said anything about the ritual at first. It would not be until a few days later that one of the students would text a friend about the incident, after which the friend told his parents about it and they brought them to the police. But even after her arrest, the victims themselves remained quiet about the incident. Due to the fact that no one was willing to testify as to what had happened, the exact details of what happened during the ritual were elusive. It is because of this murky quality to it all that Harkins was only found guilty for just one of the counts of child abuse and one count of aggravated battery, netting her a 6-month prison sentence and putting her on a $55,000 bail. But she seems to have gotten off very lightly, all things considered. Another factor contributing to this weirdness of the story is that after the release of Harkins, no one has seen or heard from her. It is like she has vanished from the earth. Alright, so after hearing that story, probably with all these stories today, I don't have any direct comments about it. I'm really interested in the listener's perspective. What do they think? What do they think happened? Are you one of the people who's a skeptic and think that she was just, I don't want to say the word crazy, but just had some type of mental instability? Or do you believe that something paranormal is going on, something spiritual, something demonic? What is your opinions? Are you a person from the community who has some type of insight that wasn't disclosed to the public? Has she reappeared since her last disappearance? Do you know some of the kids who had taken place in those rituals? What is your insights? What do you think? I don't really want to tell people what to think. I like to hear people's opinions. I like to hear people's perspectives. So if you have a perspective, please share. I'm excited to hear from you. On to our next story. Since the day I've learned of the Freemasons, there has always been rumors surrounding the group being involved in nefarious acts. Even though those rumors can be cast off as nothing more than barbershop talk, this next event is documented. In 1826, a resident of New York by the name of William Morgan went missing from the local jail. Witnesses heard Morgan shout murder as he is being forced into a carriage by 4 men. Morgan was not a man of importance. In fact, he was known as a bit of a drunk. But Morgan was more than the vagabond he appeared to be. He had also managed to infiltrate the secret society of Freemasons and was threatening to publish a book exposing the powerful organization's tactics. As a result of his plan, the local Masons began harassing Morgan, hoping to stop the publishing of his expose Thereafter had been a series of fires at the print shop where Morgan planned on publishing his book. Later, after being held in prison on trumped-up charges, Morgan was bailed out by a group of Masons and carried away, never to be seen again. The men accused of Morgan's disappearance were put on trial, but in January of 1827, they were handed relatively lenient sentences. Although they had been involved in a potential murder, the defendants received prison terms ranging from 1 month to 2 years in jail. And unfortunately, this is where the story ends. Morgan being carried away on a carriage into the night. After hearing that story, what do you think happened to Mr. Morgan? I had read one of the theories that he was paid off by the guys and went off and lived the rest of his life, happily ever after. But maybe not. That's just a theory. That's what a theory is. Nobody really knows. You just think, you come up with these ideas. So, what do you think? What is your theory? Do you think he was killed? Do you think he was murdered? Do you think he was paid off? Do you think he just, pleaded his way out of it? They just let him go? Maybe they released him in the middle of nowhere. It was like, get the hell out of here. Who knows? Nobody knows what happened to Mr. Morgan. He just disappeared. Never seen again after that night. But what do you think? What are your thoughts? What would you have done in those situations? Would you be blackmailing these men, this group? And what secrets did he know that he was perceived as being dangerous, that he needed to be removed? On to our next story. An unidentified assailant, often known as the Texarkana Phantom Killer, committed a number of murders and assaults in Texarkana through the spring of 1946. 5 people were killed and 3 were wounded. While there was one major suspect, he was never convicted of these crimes. The attack served partially as the basis for a motion picture, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. On February 22, 1946, 2 young people, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean LeRae, were parked on a secluded Bowie County road outside Texarkana. They were forced out of their car by an armed man. His face was hidden by a burlap sack with 2 slits for his eyes. The assailant beat Hollis with a gun, cracking the young man's skull in 2 places. He then sexually assaulted LeRae before fleeing when he saw the headlights of a car approaching. Both of the victims eventually recovered from their wounds. 1 month later, on March 24th, 2 more young people, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, were found on another Bowie County back road, both shot in the back of the head with a .32 revolver. Blood stains on the ground indicated they had been killed outside the car and then put back in it. The following month, on April 14, teenagers Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker were found dead in Spring Lake Park on the Texas side, with their bodies found some distance away from their car. Again, the .32 was the murder weapon. The young women in both grisly killings had been tortured and sexually assaulted before dying. Police began patrolling secluded roads and lovers' lanes. The next month, on May 3rd, an isolated farmhouse in Miller County was the scene of another murder. Virgil Starks was shot twice and killed by an attacker standing outside the front window. When the dead man's wife, Katie Starks, heard the shots and ran to the phone, she was shot twice in the face. Nevertheless, she was able to escape and run to a nearby farmhouse for help. Though a .22 pistol had been used in Starks' death, tire tracks similar to those in earlier cases were found at the scene, and the crime was generally attributed to the same killer. In all, 2 women and 3 men were killed. With each new murder, panic rose high in Texarkana. Citizens bought weapons and stayed in their homes at night, literally dreading sundown. Law enforcement officials on both Arkansas and Texas sides of the city worked the case. Texas Rangers arrived, including the handsome, charismatic Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez, and reporters from all over the country flocked to the town, adding a new level of chaos. When neighbors reported seeing strange lights from the Starks farmhouse, local police surrounded the home only to find Gonzalez and a woman reporter from Life magazine taking photos of the crime scene with flashbulbs. The murders were soon dubbed the Moonlight Murders by the news media. Although the first two occurred a week after the full moon and the final attack occurred around the time of the new moon. Because he seemed to strike and vanish, the Night Stalker was also dubbed the Phantom Killer by the local newspaper. Numerous individuals claimed to be the Phantom Killer, while other citizens came forward accusing various local residents, including an agent of the Internal Revenue Service. One young man, a student of the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, who came from a prominent Texarkana family, killed himself in his room in Fayetteville, leaving a poem and confession. Unfortunately, it had turned out to be a false lead. The one suspect who was often cited as the probable killer was a repeat offender by the name of U.L. Sweeney, who had a record of car theft, counterfeiting, burglary, and assault. An Arkansas law enforcement official, Max Tackett, had noticed that before each murder, there were reports of a car being stolen and then abandoned. In July of 1946, a stakeout of a reported stolen car on the Arkansas side led police to a woman who claimed to be Sweeney's girlfriend. She provided details of the murders that had not been released to the public. Subsequently, her story changed and she married Sweeney. Because of the unreliability and the fact that she could not be forced to appear as a witness against her husband, law enforcement officials declined to prosecute. In 1947, U.L. Sweeney was jailed for life as a repeat offender for car theft, but was released on appeal in 1973. While some sources say he later died in prison, others say he died in 1994 at a nursing home in Dallas. To date, the identity of the Phantom Killer remains unknown. While theoretically still open, it is considered a cold case. In 1996, the Texarkana Gazette published a 24-page special section called The Phantom at 50, and the crime was revisited extensively in 1996 and again in 2003 by the Dallas Morning News. All right, so what do you think? What are your opinions? What do you feel? Do you think that the guy's Sweeney? Hopefully I'm saying his name right. Not really sure. But do you think that he was the actual killer? Do you think that he was being scapegoated due to the fact that he was already a convicted criminal? Do you think it was one person? Multiple people? And if you're a person from that community or has ties to that community, what have you heard about these murders? Maybe you have somebody in your family, like your grandmother, grandfather, somewhere around that age, who lived in that community during those times. And the community may have had an idea who was the killer or killers, but really couldn't provide any evidence. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. Hopefully you rejoin us on every Weird Wednesday and Scary Sunday at the Just Here in the Dark podcast with me, your host, Sean. Have a good one.